everyone, welcome to another art tips, tricks, and hacks video. In this one I wanted to go over how to quote unquote erase when you can't truly erase watercolor, but basically lift the paint off the paper and lighten it up or get it as close to white as you possibly can. So this is just a sort of doodle watercolor sketch I was fooling around with in my sketchbook, and I sort of just left it because I didn't like the way it turned out. So I thought it would be perfect for demoing this particular technique in trying to lighten up paint that has already dried. So that was completely dry paint, and I took my watercolor brush, the round tip size for Princeton Art and Brush Company, and I got it wet and then tapped it on my towel to get it just damp so it wasn't soaking wet. And then I basically just go over, you see I'm kind of going back and forth in a sweeping motion trying to lift off, first sort of move the paint around to get it wet again, and then I try to lift it off with the brush and then use a clean cloth to blot it and lift even more paint away. So you can tell that really lightened that area up. So that was a little bit of a larger area, and then I smoothed out the edges with just the damp brush. And now I'm working on more fine lines where I'm using the tip of the brush, and you can see I'm getting a nice light line of detail in there. It was completely dark shadowed before, the darkest pink that was on there. And same technique, you just have a damp brush and using the tip kind of go in the motion and in the space where you want the paint to lighten up, and just go over and over until you get it as light as you can. And again, blotting with a clean paper towel or cloth when you need to get all of the paint up. Okay, so that was the method for using it on dry paint. Now I'm going to show you what you can do to lighten and lift or erase watercolor that is completely wet. So I'm going in with a color green that has a lot of that can really stain, and I laid it down on the paper, and now I'm using my size 8 flat brush to go in and just lift off large fields of color. You can see it comes off very easily when it's very wet. It hasn't had a chance to seep into the paper too much. So you can just go in with your damp brush and then go back with a cloth and lift it up. You can see it's very light compared to the way it was normally when I first laid it down. And now I'm going to show you that you can, when it's freshly laid on there, get it as close to the white of the paper as possible. This actually got even lighter than I expected, and I think it's because it was still so wet that I was able to lift it off. You do have to be careful though with this technique, whether it's the wet paint or dry paint. If you work the surface of the paper too much, it'll start flaking off and giving these little balls of paper surface that come off, and it'll damage the surface of your paper. So you want to try and be careful. If you get to that point, you might want to stop and just realize, okay, I'm not going to get it as white as I want to. But that worked really well. It was almost back to the pure white, just faintest hint of green. And now I'm going to go back and show you what to do with wet paint and trying to get the fine detailed lines. It's not as easy as when your paint has already dried, because when you go back in, even with just a damp brush to try and lift some of that paint off, the paint is still wet and is going to move around, so it might seep into the areas that you lifted paint off of. So you can tell I tried doing a line there and it didn't make much of a difference. So you'll have to go over several times. And then as I was doing this, the paint was drying, and as it got a little more dry, it just worked better because the paint was not bleeding back over the white areas or the lighter areas. going in and adding several lines just to show you full detail, and now the paint has started to get a little more dry, so it's a little easier to lift off some of the paint. And that is that. That's how you can almost erase watercolor. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you find this helpful. Please check out my other videos, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.